Hello and welcome to 10 by 9, where 9 people have up to 10 minutes each to tell a true story from their own life. I'm Paul Dorn, and this is the 10 by 9 podcast. The daffodils are nodding in the breeze and the lambs are gambling in the fields. If you have fields near you, that is. As spring makes its steady advance. It's wonderful, and here are 3 uplifting stories as we head into the brighter evenings.
So after what felt like a long time since I last darkened the door, I walked into a service, stood with the congregation, opened my mouth to sing, and instead sobbed my heart out.
Where could we go for 3 nights that would be easy and cheap to travel? To Constantinople or Istanbul for some, like Derry, Londonderry.
So it didn't say out loud that I thought it was somewhat strange that this real medium didn't know that her own house was going to burn down.
The 3 stories were told at different events in 2025 and 26 and include one first-timer, an annual attender, and a beloved regular. Okay, let's start. And every February, Don Gregory makes the pilgrimage from his home in England to Belfast and 10 by 9, and it's wonderful to have him. So here's the story he told this year when the theme was directions.
I found it strange after waiting so long to finally know the day that life would change. It was exactly 40 days and nights from the phone call confirming it until the day that my spine would be rebuilt. Now, when I say spine, it was only 3 vertebrae, but 3 vertebrae that were resting bone on bone. Discs, cartilage, whatever else you think should be in there, all a mere memory. 3 vertebrae that had slipped forward, making the space in the middle narrower, aggravating and trapping nerves and whatever else was running through this vital corridor to my lower extremities. I'd been upright and walking through it all, but in recent years slower and slower and in a lot more pain. 3 days after the call, I met the surgeon with my wife. He told us all the risks, all the things that could possibly go wrong, and also told us that if all went to plan, I'd be back on my feet the following day and the pain in my legs would be gone. The caveat was it might be cancelled, even on the day itself. The date was right in flu season, and if the beds were full in the hospital, then all elective surgery gets cancelled, and I'm back in the hateful waiting place. 12 days before the op, though, I was a believer. I felt assured it would go ahead, and I was also almost a complete emotional wreck. Mrs. Dawn came downstairs to find me sobbing. She held me and I could hardly speak. I'd put headphones on and cranked up an old favourite tune just to get lost in it for a moment. When it got to a certain point, I was instantly transported to a time years before, a time before all this infirmity, a time when I wasn't broken. Back when I lived on the Lisburn Road, sauntered to every pub in town and staggered home, or miraculously just appeared there. It was so visceral and real and joyous that when my current reality hit me, I could hardly breathe. I remembered that guy. I liked him. I missed him. Was there even a chance he could return? And that's how things were in the latter part of those 40 days and 40 nights, highs and lows. And then it happened. A couple of weeks before Christmas, in a major hospital, overwhelmed by all things, my little operation went ahead. My little 9-hour spine rebuild happened. Sadly, I wasn't on my feet the next day. I was ordered to stay lying down, and I also had pain in my legs. Don't get me wrong, the operation was a success. All bones settled, secure, all screws and support rods where they needed to be. All nerves were released from their torment, but there's a strange thing about nerves. They have security and familiarity. They get used to the same signals and info. And when all that disappears and they are released into a freedom they were not expecting, I don't understand. Sometimes they complain. All this metalwork, scars, etc., only to be told that titanium is not magnetic, and therefore, with the exception of the very expensive ones, metal detectors won't pick it up. I mean, what's the point in all this? If I can't pull out a story, it's security. I was in hospital for the longest 5 nights of my life, and I escaped, legitimately. I aced the final exam, stormed across the ward for the physio, made it up and down a flight of stairs twice, job done. Then I got home and crashed. My first days at home were so bad. It should have been such a coup to be released from hospital so I could wake up at home on my daughter's birthday. But I had a dreadful night, and wife and daughter were both dying from their own winter illnesses, so we barely communicated. The comedian Milton Jones once said, "We had a really peaceful Christmas one year when Mum decorated the cake with diazepam." On Christmas Day, I was on diazepam and morphine. It was very peaceful. Broke Mrs. Dawn's heart, to be honest, as she practically spent it alone when she wasn't in work. How I didn't actually keel over and faceplant in the fabulous dinner she cooked for us is amazing. I was close a few times. On Christmas afternoon, before the narcoleptic dinner, I'd made it for a walk. I think the picture of me that I sent my mum then was her greatest treat, and the siblings were emotional too. I also managed to stand up in the shower on my own, so a real Christmas Day treat for everyone. We didn't make it to church on Christmas Day, and having had to put on a service on a Thursday, our church, like many newer churches, decided to take the following Sunday off. For many, the loneliest and most empty time in the calendar, and communities of faith stand offering nothing. I love our church, but like many people of faith, we could be so much better. I hadn't been much long before the op, was instructed to reduce contact with groups of people to stay healthy. So after what felt like a long time since I last darkened the door, I walked into a service, stood with the congregation, opened my mouth to sing, and instead sobbed my heart out. As a service, it contained nothing profound, nothing I could point you towards that sparked the tears, but what I can tell you is my heart was screaming, I am here. I'm on the other side. I'm up and I'm dressed. I walked from the car to my seat, and I am stood in a room with humanity. I am alive, and I am here. I wept because I was past the worst of the darkness. Those 5 nights in hospital were hellish. So many stories and horrors I could tell here in this place, but they were all behind me, had no power anymore. They were memories, and I survived. 2 days after, the physio told me I could be more active. She said the initial caution was just to let the wound heal, and all was good on that front. I started wiggling, moving. My muscles didn't like being woken up, but no apologies. You've slept too long. In the words of German cyclist Jens Voigt, Shut up, legs. A week after making it to church, I went again. Later that day, I took the dog around the block on my own. It felt like victory. There have been more victories. More days where I've felt a little bit like old Lisburn rode me. But there have also been other days where getting out of bed has been the greatest achievement. One day I walked through town. I had 2 walking sticks and I was slow and leaning on them heavily. It was raining. There was only plodding me, a few other soggy shoppers, and about a dozen people in light blue tabards saying things like, Jesus saves, and no joke, need healed, talk to me and I can pray for you. Not one of the dozen approached me, talked to me, or even made eye contact to acknowledge my presence. I reckon they were hoping to bring Jesus something a little more ethereal and vague, like a headache or a sore toe, something to declare healed when it probably wasn't. I'm not complaining though. I'm not sure I could have coped with their sad little disappointed faces when their magic incantations didn't lead me to cast the sticks aside and tap dance back to the car. They say it takes time for nerves to heal, for them to accept their new world and to calm down. Mine haven't yet. But I am hopeful. I have come so far. I may have been a little slow walking up here tonight, and I may not be the quickest returning to my seat. But I am here.
Dawn, that was such a powerful story, told brilliantly. You can hear how much the audience appreciated it, and to be honest, it took me to the brink of tears, even now, hearing it again for the umpteenth time. Thank you. I look forward to next year's submission when you're here. If, like Dawn, you want to tell your story at 10 by 9, get in touch through the submissions page at our website, 10by9.com, or email me directly at 10by9belfast@gmail.com. Be sure to have a look at our guidelines first, though, just to be sure. Looking forward to hearing from you. Okay, on to our second story, and it's from a first-timer who might also be our first Greek contributor, but I can't be certain. Here's Rania Charalampidou, who told this in October last year when the theme was Cheers.
It was before the turn of the century. Easter was approaching. No plans were made. As usual, Easter had to be spent in a traditional way, which involves the gathering of many of the extended family at my maternal grandparents' village, a period of Lent from meat and any animal-derived food. On Holy Thursday, the coloring of eggs in red and home-baked sweet bread. Good Friday, the procession of the Epitaphios. Saturday midnight candle mass for the announcement that Christ has risen, following by egg-cracking game and fireworks. Return from church that night to eat a soup made with the internal organs, there is a better name, but I prefer to describe it this way, of either a goat or a sheep, served with an egg lemon sauce. On Sunday Easter, we continue the celebration with more food, music, alcohol, dance, and the focus is on the tradition of roasting the whole sheep or goat on a spit. The weather is usually good, so celebration takes place outdoors. My twin brother and I had different ideas for this Easter. We decided to travel outside Greece. Where could we go for 3 nights that would be easy and cheap to travel? To Constantinople, or Istanbul for some, like London Derry. We found a cheap trip organized by a church group. We had no money, we were just students, including transport, accommodation, and the visit to the Greek Patriarchate for the Holy Saturday Midnight Mass. The Greek Patriarchate is the equivalent of the Vatican for the Greek Orthodox Church. It is in Constantinople. So we could say it's like the Vatican being in Shankill. What a brilliant idea that was. The two of our friends decided to join us. But what can we tell our families? They will be crossed and they will not give us any money. Well, we told them that we wanted to spend Easter in the Greek Patriarchate, that we wanted to feel the connection of our religion and our history. Well, I don't think they believed us. But off we went, excited and with the blessings of our families. Constantinople. We didn't know what to expect. A big, vibrant, busy city, rich in history and culture. We visited Hagia Sophia, Blue Mosque, the Greek University, and of course the Greek Patriarchate. Then we left the beaten track, and that was the reason we escaped Easter in Greece. The nightclubs, the restaurants, the hammam baths. One evening we found ourselves walking in the bank of Bosporus. We were looking for a traditional coffee shop away from the touristy track because we wanted to try shisha, or nargileh in Greek language. We were a bit apprehensive as we hadn't tried this before, so we walked past few shops, we looked inside, far too old, far too many men, far too serious, too dirty. And then we spotted the shop that we all felt comfortable to step in. A young boy approached us and said something in Turkish. "I'm sorry," I said. "English?" He must have asked me where we're from. I knew only one word, Yunan, which means Greek in Turkish language. He smiled. His body language was telling us to wait there. He walked towards the back door and disappeared into the smoke. A few minutes later, he appeared through the same door. He was not on his own. 120 years old man with a leathery skin edged by a million stories wrinkles of face walked with a slow but sturdy gait. Each of his knuckles had a tattoo on. "Oh my God," I said, "if this guy can speak English, I will take off my clothes and swim in Bosporus." The man was standing in front of us. He smiled and said, "Kalispera, πώς να βοηθήσω?" He wasn't speaking English. He was speaking Greek. They all looked at me. "You better start stripping," they said. And we all laughed. We were now relaxed and felt home from home. He sat with us. He told us he had been a deckmate in many, but mostly Greek cargo ships. He traveled to many countries, every port and a story, but he always returned to the same port. He had been in love for many years with a Greek lady. He could speak English, Greek, French, and Russian. Fascinating. We wanted to know more. He told us about a story of a young Irish boy who worked on the ship with him. The Irish boy was young and excited, a bit like ourselves, I suppose. He bought a new camera and he decided to take some photos when they moored in Odessa. A few hours later, the Greek captain was informed that the young Irish boy was arrested by the police. The captain had to go to the police quarter with our friend, and eventually they rescued the boy and his camera. The officials kept his film. The old man took one puff of his cigarette. He looked at us and said, "It is wonderful to have youth and naivety, but have awareness and respect for the places life may send you." We were too young to understand that. We smoked shisha. We had few drinks. "Yamas, cheers," we said. "We may meet again," I said. "Yamas, cheers," he said. "We may not." We thanked him, he smiled, and he walked away back to the door he first walked in. We returned home. We were filled with wonderful experiences. The hotel we stayed, only to find out the early hours of our first morning that it was situated beside a mosque. We felt like somebody shouted in our ear. Every morning we had to try not to leap out of bed with a call to prayer. The bars, the hammam baths, and so much more we packed in a short holiday. Nearly a quarter of a century later, I found myself living in Belfast. One day, a neighbor in his 80s stopped me on the street near my house and asked me, "Are you the Greek girl?" What a question, I thought. "Yes, I am," I replied. "Is that okay?" "Oh, I'm Joe," he said. "I live down the road from you." "Yasu." "Kala." He spoke in broken Greek. "Oh, you obviously have been on holidays in Greece." I get that all the time. Yes, he said, "I have." He told me I could go to his house anytime because he would like to practice his Greek again. A year passed and I heard there was a loss in his family. I decided finally to visit him. I made some Greek food. A Greek custom, never pay a visit empty-handed. So he had some visitors that evening. We sat, we talked about different things. Then I asked him, where did he learn Greek? He told me that when he was a young boy, he left Northern Ireland to work on the ships. He only worked on Greek ships. "I'm sure," I said, "you have many stories to tell." Yes, he had. He recounted some. Then the last story he finished with, "It was scary. I got away by the skin of my teeth." The story. That story. I thought I heard it before. I had. I gasped. I had to tell him. I did tell him. He brought back my memory, years back, almost a quarter of a century. He startled. His eyes were filled with tears. We talked more. "Thank you," I heard him whispering as my heart strung with melody. Have we had met in some way again that night? He poured another glass of red wine for him, a Southern comfort with Coke for me. "Slanja, yamas, cheers to us," he said, "and the Turkish deckmate," I said.
Thanks so much, Rania. What an amazing coincidence. I actually had to check with Rania that this wasn't fiction because some people don't realise 10 by 9 is only true stories, but she assured me it was real. How brilliant. Now, just a quick thank you to everyone who helps keep 10 by 9 going with donations. Some of you give via Patreon and some of you donate to StoryPig at our live events. Either way, thank you. 10 by 9 is always free and always will be, so it really helps keep this little project on the go. Okay, let's get on with our third and final story for this podcast. He told his first story in January 2020, and he's barely stopped since, and we're delighted. Here's Paul Brady.
I hadn't worked in my first proper job for very long, and I was the youngest in the department by a distance. The girls in the office told me that everyone was going to see a real medium, not one of those fake ones, a real one. I hadn't worked in my first proper job for very long, and I was the youngest in the department by a distance. I pushed down my urge to laugh out loud. The girls told me that her house had been burned down in a fire, so she'd hired an empty office nearby for the day. I hadn't worked in my first proper job for a long time, and I was the youngest in the department by a distance. So I didn't say out loud that I thought it was somewhat strange that this real medium didn't know that her own house was going to burn down. Nevertheless, I paid my tenner and we travelled in 2 cars filled to capacity with overly excited women. The medium seemed surprised that so many of us had turned up. Once again, I was surprised that she was surprised. Surely she should have known. Surely a spectral presence would have whispered in her ear, "Here, There's £100 coming. Turn them lights down a bit. Put your shawl on. Remember to say everything in a creepy half whisper. When it was my turn to go into the room, I played it straight. I was genuinely interested to hear if she had anything memorable to say about my future. The office had been darkened. A middle-aged, white-haired woman, her shoulders wrapped in a shawl, sat behind a large desk on one of 2 available chairs. There was a standing lamp behind her, which cast her face in shadow. Fair play to her. It was a solid 8 out of 10 for drama and suspense. I smiled and said hello. She motioned for me to sit down. I don't really tell the future, she said in a half whisper. My eyes rolled hard internally. I can tell you about yourself and your past. Sometimes, but only sometimes, I get a tiny glimpse into the future, but it won't be much. That's okay, I said, while quietly thinking about what else I could have got for a tenner. Are you left-handed or right-handed? She continued. Right, I said, once again assuming that she should have known. Well then, we'll use your left hand, she said. The reading will be stronger. There may be a problem there, I said, lifting my left hand onto the desktop. It was heavily bandaged, from my wrist to my fingertips, with my thumb sticking out at the side. Had a bit of a fall, I said. We'll use your right hand then. But the reading probably won't be as clear. All right, we'll get it, love, shouted the voice in my head. You don't want to get nailed down on the details. Fine, that's okay. Just get on with it, will you? We're starving and you have our lunch money. She placed my upturned, unbandaged hand between both of her hands and closed her eyes. She got extra whispery. You have a good sense of humour and you're popular with women. I'd arrived with 9 women. I had been making them laugh outside the door for 15 minutes. She was good, this one. You're accident prone. The voice in my head laughed out loud. What give it away, Mystic Meg? The slightly bruised face or the mummy hand? I was really struggling now not to throw my head back and shout, oh, come on, Meg, for God's sake. For a tenner, I should be at least getting a tall, dark, handsome stranger at this point. She must have sensed my ever-growing impatience. To be fair, it would have been the first thing she'd sensed. The woman didn't know her own house was fucking burning down. I'm getting something from the future, she whispered. She closed her eyes and made a face like she was passing a slightly distressing stool. I waited. You will marry. A woman. Who is much shorter than you. Brilliant. I'm 6'4", I'd like to think so. She'll have dark hair and dark eyes, she continued, and you'll have more than one child together. The only thing that put me off giving a slow hand clap at this point was the fact that it would hurt my accident-prone hand. She never even had a stab at telling me how I got my bandaged hand in the first place. A week previously, a bunch of us had travelled to a friend's holiday home in Ballyhornan on the County Down Riviera. We drank day and night, stayed up late, played loud cards and even louder music. On the morning of the third day, someone suggested we go for a walk on the beach to clear our heads. The tide was coming in and lapping over a long semicircular ridge of black rocks that were embedded in the sand. So there we were, a bunch of mostly blokes walking along a beach, probably still a bit drunk. Naturally, talk turned to ridiculous dares. Someone suggested that it would be impossible to run along the entire length of the semicircle of stones if it was timed between the crashing of 2 waves. It would be another 30 years before my ADHD was confirmed. So back then, I was always just up for the crack. I stood at one end of the long spine of rocks, poised like a coiled spring. Wave in, wave out, ready. Wave in, wave out, steady. Wave in, wave out, go. I ran as fast as I could towards the first rock on the ridge. Now, there are things that you should know that an ADHD brain doesn't really care about. 1, practice runs. Size it up quickly and have a go. 90% of the time it works all of the time. 2, safety. Don't run on sharp rocks. Well, that's advice for wooses. 3, basic rules of science. Water makes things wet. My gutty briefly hit the first sharp, slimy rock, and then I was airborne. After a few seconds of noisy, sweary flight, I slammed back down on the very same rocks and was immediately submerged beneath a wave of freezing cold seawater. I scrambled to my feet before stumbling back to the small crowd of family and friends, who, like me, were doubled over with laughter. I felt a weird throbbing in my hand. I looked down. It seemed that I'd put my hand out to break my fall, and the rocks were even sharper than I thought. It had opened the palm of my hand right down to the bone. The laughter faded as everyone began to notice the ragged, gaping smile in my hand, which was now bleeding pretty badly. I was rushed back to the house. My hand was wrapped tightly in a medically clean tea towel, and I was driven at speed to the hospital in Downpatrick. It was Saturday morning, and the casualty was quiet. The nice nurse said that I would need a tetanus, and what turned out to be 8 stitches in my hand. The tetanus would be administered to my upper right quadrant, which turned out to be medical speak for me arse. There was a problem though. It was the late 1980s. I was wearing skin-tight bleached jeans, which were now even tighter thanks to the seawater, and impossible to manoeuvre with one hand. I had to bend across a bench while the nurse yanked and rolled them down until enough of my rear end was exposed to be a tetanus destination site. I stared at the posters on the wall and didn't make eye contact. She left the cubicle. I breathed through the shame and the embarrassment. Suddenly I could hear a rattling noise like cutlery on a metal tray. A curtain pulled back and a very elderly nurse in a weird, old-fashioned looking sister's uniform stepped in. She was carrying a small metal tray with a syringe in it. Her violent shaking was making the syringe jump up and down inside the tray. She was 90 if she was a day. "Hello," she said pleasantly. "You've to get a tetanus?" "Oh, sweet Jesus," said my brain. She grabbed the syringe and walked towards me. Her hands were shaking and jerking that much she looked like she was conducting an invisible orchestra. "You'll feel a little scratch," she said. Famous last words, said my brain. I closed my eyes and prepared for a multiple stabbing. I could hear footsteps sprinting up outside. The first nurse came bailing through the curtain. "Sister, no!" She grabbed the syringe and composed herself. "The girls need a hand in cubicle 2, please, sister." The old lady smiled and just dotted off. The nurse waited a few seconds until the old dear was out of earshot and then continued. "She's been retired years and years, but she comes in on a Saturday to help out when we're busy. She's great with the kids, but she's not allowed to actually treat anybody." I got my tetanus and endured another embarrassing sitcom sketch as 2 nurses this time heaved and pulled to get my bags back up. 8 stitches then pulled the raggedy hand smile into a tight, crooked line, as Richard would say, this crooked line. I was back at the holiday house just in time for the Saturday night one-handed eating, drinking and poker challenge to begin. All this had happened within the last few days, and all that Mystic Meg could tell me was that I was tall, pretty, and had hurt my hand. I was far from impressed, but that probably had a lot to do with the fact that I was very hungry and my hand was sore. To be fair to Meg, She did go on to tell me one thing that was weirdly accurate. She told me that my best friend had died in an accident when we were both very young. She saw the initial J. My best friend James had died in an accident when we were both 9. She told me that she could see him standing behind me when she was speaking. She described 9-year-old him perfectly, right down to the football he was holding. She said that he was now what people would call a guardian angel and was constantly at my side, watching over me at all times. Weirdly, since the age of 9, and despite my lifelong cynicism for such things, I've always talked to James, still visit his grave regularly to this day, update him on what's going on, what I've been doing, what he's missed. But I've actually derived a huge amount of comfort from that one bizarre revelation over 40 years ago. Jamesy and I begrudgingly agree it was actually worth a tenner after all.
Paul, another cracking story. As I said on the night, you take us to a certain level, then take us higher, and then higher again. Brilliant. Looking forward to having you back at 10 by 9 very soon. And that's it for this edition of the 10 by 9 podcast. You can keep up with all our upcoming events and some of our themes by having a look at our website, 10by9.com. Plan your 2026 visit to the Black Box if you've not been yet. All the dates for the year are there, plus we've a few collaborations and some extra dates up there, so come and join us. Always free. 10 by 9 is on the socials, of course. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook and or Instagram. And you can get in touch via email at 10by9belfast@gmail.com. Thanks to everyone who helps make 10 by 9 happen. Our wee team of volunteers, Leanne, Margaret, Chris and Cara. It would be impossible without you. The wonderful staff at the Black Box, home to 10 by 9 since 2011. Thanks to our fantastic 10 by 9 audiences. You make everyone feel so welcome, including me. And thanks to the thousands of people who have shared their story at 10 by 9 over the years, but especially Don Gregory, Rania Charalampidou and Paul Brady. I'm Paul Dorn, and I'll be back with another podcast soon. But for now, bye-bye.